Thank you for joining us again in our show, Diaspora Life Show. This week we continue with our theme, which is Born in Kenya, Raised in the USA, the Burdens of an Identity Crisis. Welcome to our show. I had this interview with Annette, this Kenyan-born, American-raised Baltimore resident, almost 5 years ago. But this discussion still resonates today because, in more ways than one, it clearly brings out the identity crisis that many young Kenyans living abroad face.
My name is Annette Carranza. I am from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm a first-generation Kenyan American, been living here in the United States for a majority of my life, although I was born in Kenya. But I was brought over here by my parents. I have participated in the public school system here, and I'm currently in college. I'm about to graduate, and I've been an active member of the Kenyan community as well. I'm a first generation. My youngest brother and sister were born here, so part of that generation. And then we have that generation now having children as well. So we have some Kenyan Americans who have never been to Kenya or were never raised there in any part of their life. So we do have like 3 generations.
What's your memory of Kenya?
I don't have one from growing up. I have visited. My family has been blessed enough to be able to go back home, which is a luxury that not every Kenyan family has, especially being from a very large family. I'm one of 4 children, and so it can be difficult to actually go back home and visit family.
Where do you place yourself? Are you Kenyan or American? Kenyan American or American Kenyan? How do you look at yourself?
Well, definitely both really play a significant role in our identity here in the United States. We tend to refer to ourselves as Kenyan Americans, although we know the American culture very well. We were still raised in Kenyan households, and we still have very, very Kenyan values. And the only problem that we face when it comes to those two is not necessarily being able to balance the two, but having to choose when we're interacting with one community or the other. There's this pressure to pick one when they shouldn't be mutually exclusive. We're both all the time.
But David wanted me to talk about the diaspora, investing in the diaspora. And most people, and when I first looked at that, I was like, well, that sounds like we're talking about investing our money here in each other, which is not a bad thing. But I think there's a bigger picture to that. As diaspora growing in the States or in any country outside our motherland, we have to build our own capacity up. We have to work with each other. We have to maintain our culture for our next generation. The biggest risk I see with people who've been in places like the United States and other countries is that after 2 or 3 generations, the kids have lost it. They're now just, Americans, which is nothing wrong, but it'd be nice for my great-grandchildren to be Kenyan Americans, not just Americans. And so to that extent, I've spent a lot of time working with youth in my community to retain culture. If we want our kids to recognize themselves as Kenyans, then they've got to eat ugali, they've got to eat skuma. If they don't know what that is, then they don't know what Kenya is. If they can't speak the language, they're going to lose the culture.
Blessed is our land and nation.
Justice be our shield and defender. May we dwell in unity, peace, and liberty.
As cases of suicide, domestic violence, and alcohol and drug abuse rise within the Kenyan diaspora community, the hardest hit group is the youth who are constantly haunted by the issues of identity crisis.
It's confusing simply because the types of adjustments that we have to do are very significantly different, considering our Kenyan culture versus the American culture. And it can be confusing when you are in a setting with both, a function where you have a public forum where you have your Kenyan community, your family, and also the American community. That's where we really have a problem and struggle, because we don't know which one should take priority, which one should take the forefront in those type of situations. But switching back and forth is unfortunately one of the talents that we just developed by being Kenyan Americans.
Tribalism, sexism, sectionalism, and tribal cards are destructive forces. Across the lesson that we have learned, together we make a nation. Kwa sababu kidole kimoja hakivunji chawa. And for this cause, I pledge my loyalty to the President of the nation of Kenya, my readiness and duty to defend the flag of our republic, my devotion to the words of our national anthem.
As our Kenyan community tends to be very, very separate from our American community. So if there was more integration, it would be easier. That we're not the only immigrants here in the United States. There are other cultures who have been able to successfully manage the two communities inclusively, and the Kenyan community, I just feel like, is too young. We've only started coming over here in the 1960s, and we're still developing a manner in which we can be a part of this American population and integrate in a way that is allowing us to still be Kenyan, but also to participate together with the American community.
From the way young Kenyans living abroad feel about how they are regarded by the community, especially their parents, it's clear that they occupy an aspect of diaspora life that has not been well highlighted and tackled.
We're definitely put in a very unique category because it is a tendency for people to want to congregate in groups that are like themselves. I started off my education here in the public system at a majority African American school, where we all kind of look the same, yet I was distinctly different. The way that I talked was funny, the way that I dressed was different, and those things kind of caused me to be disconnected from the community that I had there. With time, I was able to assimilate enough where I was still different, but able to interact with my peers in a healthy manner. After that, I went to a majority white school, so being African was not my biggest problem. It was being a part of a very, very small cluster. I was the only black person in my classes for the most part. And I was also in a gifted and talented program, so there was a bit of pressure for me to be successful in those classes during that time period. And that is something that is very difficult to describe, especially for Kenyans who are coming here for the first time. I would love to be able to warn them about the racial tensions that are here in America, but it's something, unfortunately, that we all have to kind of experience to understand how to navigate it. And then being Kenyan at that point in time was kind of cool. There comes a time where people appreciate the fact that you're distinctly different. When we're younger, unfortunately, it's a negative, but as we grow in the system, as we get older, it becomes an advantage that we have a culture and an ancestry that we can distinctly describe, and there's interest there, and it makes us distinct in a positive manner.
It's clear that the Kenyan community has not addressed well the dilemma that kids born in Kenya and raised in America, or even those who are born in America to Kenyan parents, face. Kenyans abroad frequently and easily talk about the culture shocks that always welcome one in their country of sojourn, but they rarely emphasize the fact that young people who have to go to school and interact with their peers from other cultures bear the brand of the shock.
High school is brutal. High school will be the most brutal aspect of your American life. I will not lie. College compared to high school is a breeze. It is like a walk in the park. It is like a picnic on a sunny day. I mean, high school is war in America. It really, really is. No, it really is. I mean, you will have people that will like you for no apparent reason. You could be the best student. People will hate you. You could be the prettiest, people will hate you. You'll be the ugliest, people will hate you. People will find anything to hate about you, and when they hate in America, they take it to a whole other level. I mean, a whole other level.
The cultural shock can be a very, very big burden, and it is very difficult to navigate at times. I would really encourage them to create a community or to find a community to be a part of as a support system. If you establish a support system first, then it will be a lot easier for you to navigate the education system here, the university system here. And it's good to have a Kenyan community support system, people who are able to tell you what you're going to face and what you're going to go through. And for you to do that, it has to be a multi-generational community system that you create, because there are many people who came here on student visas and have been through it and now have established themselves with a family, and those are the people who would really be able to advise you on how to navigate being here in the United States under those circumstances. The culture shock is something that no one can really brace for. There's no specific advice that I would tell you, maybe except for the food is really different. So that is one thing that I always hear. The food is really different. It is better back home. So before you leave, please feast very, very well. You're not going to get that type of eating while you're here. Other than that, though, there's not really much that can be done beyond coming here and experiencing it.
For the most part, these people are neither Kenyan nor American. Their loyalty is divided, and like the proverbial, you can't serve two masters goes, these people are experts at serving their two countries. They have to live a double life on a daily basis, because when they are at home with their folks, they have to behave in a certain way. When they are in school or college with their colleagues, the way they talk, walk, sing, and generally act around their friends is totally different. They do this because at every turn within their working hours, they have to try to fit in with whichever group they interact with. In most cases, this way of living has put them in direct conflict with their parents, who expect them to behave and act in a certain way that is consistent with how children are raised back in Africa and in an African family setup. At school, they are exposed to a more conservative and individualistic way of doing things and behaving. They are taught to believe in themselves by putting their interests first, while at home, they are told that the interest of the whole community comes first.
The challenges that young people face is that we want to box them in our experience, and our experience has become such a reality that we forget to see their reality, because the truth be told, most of these young people face challenges like school bullying. They face identity crisis. They are neither Kenyans, totally Kenyans, they are neither totally Americans. And so at home, we have the Kenyan mindset, and we have a Kenyan drive, we have a Kenyan view of worldview, but they have an American worldview. They have no idea. If you mention some of the leaders that were there before, they have no idea of those leaders, because they've grown up here. If someone came here, if they're 2 years, meaning maybe they're 18, if they're 18 and they came here, if they're 2 years, that means for 16 years they've grown up in this land, or they were born here. And so they're friends, and we insist, no, you must have Kenyan friends. There's nothing bad with that, as long as they are friends that are leading you in the right direction and not necessarily seeing things from the view of, hey, Kenya, we don't do this. As a matter of fact, 16 years ago, since you left Kenya, it's no longer the same. You'll agree with me. Things have totally changed. So our reality to them, when we present our reality and we want our reality to become their reality, that's a challenge. They feel pressured. We have high expectation of them based on our own challenges.
At home, if they speak in a certain way and do certain things, they are told that they, for instance, have become Americanized, as if they don't live in America.
And this has to do with what I think of as lack of a sense that you belong definitely to a particular culture. A lot of these young people find their African parents a little too traditional. so they have problems relating to them. So their families are not as accommodating to them psychologically as they want to be. And then the other dimension is that other thing that they find difficult to understand, that sense that they are alien. You know, they are not really American, they are not African American, and they are not entirely African when you think about it, because their parents are very different from them. So they have this sense of belonging nowhere, a limbo, a sense of exile that they can hardly define. And that's what I think haunts a lot of these young people, because they can't really talk about it. They love their parents, but they find their parents very difficult to understand a lot of times. And yet when they look on the other side, there's nothing for them. I think that has a lot to do with that sense of alienation that these young people have. And of course, it takes them away from feeling whole enough to make an effort that could result into what we think of as success. They might not think of success as going to school and making a lot of money. They are struggling psychologically just to cope. I think that might explain a lot of it, because you and I think about home as Africa. You are sitting there thinking that when you're done with school, when you're done with your work, when you're done with educating your kids, you're going to go back to your village and you'll feel very comfortable being there. Those guys don't feel like that. So if this is not home for them, where's home?
That wraps it up for us today, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. Please plan to join us again next week. But before we go, if you're a Kenyan living away from home in the diaspora, wherever it is, and you are involved in planning an event that you think will be of interest to Kenyans, and you want many Kenyans to know about it, please get in touch with us, and we'll either highlight the event, and if possible, just plan to come and cover the event. Thank you for joining us, and see you again next week.